Hare Krishna, Gauranga. I'm in the Bhajan Kutir today, but not for Kirtan this time. At least not now anyway. We'll see how it goes. You know, we can just get into the spirit of Kirtan hopefully at any time. This is the spontaneous nature of Krishna consciousness and devotional service. That, you know, in a 24-hour day, at any point during the day we should, well, except for in the middle of the night, I guess we can't be waking up the neighbours with a thunderous kirtan, but you get the idea. You know, we should be in that kirtan spirit at all times, you know. But it's another 30 key verses of the Bhagavad Gita class. We've now moved into chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, entitled Transcendental Knowledge, and this one is 4.2. So let's see if we can hopefully give a bit of an overview and churn it up just a little bit. As it says again, this is just an introduction to the 30 key verses. It's not an extensive seminars in that regard. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is chapter 4. This is text 2. Now, one thing I want to mention about this is this is same as the previous verse. This is the answer to a question, and I am going to read the shloka before, just to give the idea of what Krishna is answering here. So the shloka text 4.1 is not the 30 key verse, but it gives the reason why the Lord then speaks like this. So the Lord is establishing the history of the Bhagavad Gita. Which is a very important thing to know, because naturally sometimes we're called up to give the validity of this spiritual knowledge in the spiritual process. And you know, timelines factor in sometimes. Or Christianity came some 3,000, or something came some 2,000, or something, you know, like that. These things are also held as a proof, you know, historical record. So here Krishna says, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivashvati Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam Vivashvan Manave Praha Manu Ikshvakave Bravit. So he says that I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed to Ikshvaku. So Prabhupada goes on to say in the purport that, of course, these personalities, this is not just thousands, it was millions of years ago. He's giving the breakdown of how the yugas are presented in terms of time. So Kali Yuga is 432,000 years. Before that was Dwapara, 800,000 years. Before that was Treta, 1,200,000 years. You know, so thus some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke this Bhagavad Gita to his disciple, right? So here we're not talking. So we no longer get into just historical accounts of Christianity versus Islam versus Judaism versus this thing, that thing. Veda is universal. Bhagavad Gita is also universal. So here's our main verse. Evam parampara praptim imam rajasayo vadu sa kalaneha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Purport by the English of the Prabhupada Ki Jai. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings, because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. The first point here then is this Varnashram system, and in the Varnashram system there's like a ruling class, which is called the Kshatriyas. So the whole Bharatavarsha was ruled by one king, one ruler, who was based in India, which is why India is specifically referred to as the land of Bharatavarsha, but the whole planet is also Bharatavarsha. Before that it was Ilavratavarsa, and then so on and so forth. There was actually a king called Bharat Maharaj, and he was the ruling king over the whole world. King Yudhisthira was the king of the whole world. Maharaj Parikshit was the king of the whole world. But gradually that disintegrated and then these rulers and kings, they spread all over to different places. And it mentions that in the Bhagavatam. Actually, it says that they went off to like where Greece is now, where the other where now there's some of these what we're supposed to be defined as being the Islamic countries and so on and so forth. So all spread, these different kings, they fled to different parts of the world. And we can see that actually historical proof of Vedic culture in places like Machu Picchu and in different places on the opposite side of the world, South America. Some of these temples and different things, they've got Vishnu, they've got Ganesh, they have Garuda, they have Lord Ram, so on and so forth. Different depictions of Rasa Leela and so many different things. So we can see that this Vedic culture was everywhere over the whole world. But the seat of all power, of course, was India itself. And then these Kshatriyas, they obviously had their different groups going down. Obviously they were led by the Brahminical class. They were taught by the Brahmins, and they took advice and shelter from the Brahminical class. And then obviously the Vaishyas, they were the merchants and intelligentsia. And then obviously the worker class was the Shudras, which is what we only have now in Kali Yuga. Certainly Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demoniac persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. A very clear and obvious point there, that Bhagavad Gita is meant for understanding the Supreme Person of Godhead, Krishna. And it has no other interpretation other than Krishna as the Supreme Person of Godhead. He's the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita, and he's the supreme knower of the Bhagavad Gita, like this Vedanta Krit Veda Vedeva Chaham. He knows the Vedas, he compiled the Vedas through Veda Vyas, through his incarnation, and he is the source of the Vedas. He's the goal of the Vedas. All these things, source, goal, knower, everything. So demons, or demoniac people, or impersonalist people, atheistic people, they want to change the philosophy. Just as it's affected many of the other religions, where they had one pure teaching coming from their own acharya, so to speak, then the teachings were warped. Prabhupada used to hit so heavily on this thou shalt not kill, for example. It became thou shalt not murder, i.e. humans, because you won't murder an animal, so to speak, because there's no conscious involved in that, right? It's just they're pretty much a lesser thing, but no, thou shalt not kill means all species, because we offer and eat our food which Krishna finds acceptable. So that principle is we spoke about in this Yagya Shishdashana Santo verse, right? So the different interpret, and they're saying things like that this Bhagavad Gita was just is referring to like the God inside yourself, or that Kurukshetra is not an actual place, and so it's like a what do you say? It's just a allegorical or something like that, So these are all bogus conceptions. Bhagavad Gita is clearly the word of God, and it's clearly the book for helping us to come to the point of surrendering to Krishna before we then step into the next stage, which is the Srimad Bhagavatam and so on, etc. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to re-establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. So there Prabhupada is making that point now. He's saying that the real purpose of the Gita has been clouded. The real understanding of the Gita has been taken over by so many versions that are just for that person's own fame, for that person's own profit, and they're just clearly out of that person's own speculations and not out of actual parampara system coming from one teacher to another. Whereas this Bhagavad Gita follows an unbroken line that was re-established by the Lord himself, one guru down to another. So, and you can see in that previous shloka where they're saying that Manu spoke it to his disciple, he spoke it to his disciple, like that, and that is the parampara system. And we know that Srila Prabhupada is the most recent Acharya, and his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivinoda Saraswati Thakur, had his spiritual master, Gaurikishore Das Babaji Maharaj, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jagannath Das Babaji, and then so on and so forth, going back, And then, a few 500 years ago, there was Lord Chaitanya, there was the Goswamis, like that, going back. So we can see this in the Bhagavad Gita. It mentions this parampara line is mentioned at the end of the introduction, all the way going back to Krishna himself, unbroken line. And our spiritual masters in this movement are now spreading, There are innumerable interpretations written by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Person of Godhead, although they make a good business on the words of Krishna. This spirit is demonic, because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Now this can link up to some of the previous verses we discussed as well, that this is this point of thinking that we own something, this is our facilities, but we're not just using Krishna's material energy, we're just manipulating what's already there, and we're trying to enjoy it. So, when you try to enjoy another's property, you become a thief, right? This is even a concept in the Bible, for example, that you shouldn't covet another man's wife or property or so on and so forth. You shouldn't steal, or you should. These are all just common sense things. It's not necessarily a spiritual idea. Not to desire or want or take away by force someone else's facilities. And even those facilities that they have, they necessarily don't own them themselves, but as I guess in one sense they're a short-term proprietor of them. But our best way, an ideal way, is to use what we have in Krishna's service, dovetailing it back to the Supreme Person, and in that way then we're freeing ourselves from the karmic reaction that comes of trying to use the material energy. This spirit is demonic because demons don't believe in God, but so there's a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara, disciplic succession system. An attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity, but if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. So very strong words from Srila Prabhupada there. This was the first book that he wanted to bring, actually. Before he came to the West, he had already written the Bhagavad Gita. It was only, and then of course he did the Bhagavatam. When he came to America, his Bhagavad Gita was stolen. His manuscripts were destroyed and stolen. So he had to start again, and then his Bhagavad Gita, as it is, was then written at that point. But this was one of the main, apart from the Bhagavatam, which was his ultimate gift. Bhagavad Gita was the other main important book that Prabhupada wanted to bring. Why? Because Bhagavad Gita is that essential ABCD of spiritual life, to take us out of the concept of false ego, the concept of the body, the concept of being led or misled for that matter by the mind, all these different things, the identification to our so-called intelligence, so on and so forth, getting us all the way up into a Bhakti Yoga and then through into Krishna, or through into surrendering to Krishna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. So it is vital that we have this book, the Bhagavad Gita, and we study it very carefully. But this edition, as it is, Srila Prabhupada is a devotee in the line of Krishna. So who better than a pure devotee of the Lord to talk about the Lord? Who more qualified than a person who's not speculating about what it possibly could mean, but is telling you what the Lord said directly? This is the key thing. So with this verse, actually, this Evam Parampara Praptam is very important, because it's saying that this is, Prabhupada saying this book is what's going to have the effect. All these other Bhagavad Gitas, they were there for so many years even before Prabhupada came. But where's all the disciples in temples, and where's all the big preaching going on? Nothing happened. Maybe some few people in some small groups. But Srila Prabhupada came over, with this Bhagavad Gita, and 50-something years down the line now, look at where ISKCON is. And in many ways, we're still got so much work to do, we had an explosion, Hare Krishna explosion, but we need to keep going. We have 10,000 years of this golden opportunity to preach and to spread the Krishna conscious movement, and to try and get all the potential devotees home back to Godhead, you know. And Prabhupada said that his work wasn't finished. You know, he gave the Bhagavatam, the Gita, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, all these, gave some 60 books. You would hear that in lectures. He would speak to people and he would say, "Have you read the books? Have you seen our 60 books, our something books?" You know? And he would always promote that to people. And when you see as well, just to show the value of how much Prabhupada wanted to present the fact that there was bona fide scripture like Bhagavad Gita. When Prabhupada was speaking to someone, he would say, you know, he would just be quoting something, and just for talking sake, I just flipped a page. He would say, "Brahmanyada karmani sangam tvatvakroti yan." He would say, "Find that verse." You know, he wanted the devotees just to be able to go, "Oh yeah, that's chapter 9, text 9. Okay, cool." And they would go off and they would read it, you know. And then again, he'd be sitting there and he'd say, "Oh, Maya Shakta Manaparta," and he'd say, "Find that verse," you know. Because Prabhupada could quote from verbatim all the shlokas. Of course, Prabhupada had that knowledge. Prabhupada had, you know, his whole entire life, since he was a child, he was dedicated to Krishna consciousness, and he was studying and chanting. He was on that pure devotional platform. But still, he wanted to get the devotees to show that we have Shastra, we have a book here, we have a bona fide book that's coming from the Vedas, you know, that's spoken by the Lord himself, you know, and then here it is. Here's the proof that you can go see it and you can find it yourself and study it, you know. And he wanted to show also as well that the devotees had that knowledge, that they hadn't just come and they had put on some robes for a bit and, you know, put on this tilak marking and they were having a little bit of a jig around for a few years. They actually were studying it and taking it seriously. And this is what we're doing here. I'm hoping just to introduce these concepts to you, and then of course I'm asking and hoping that you'll go off and then you'll take these and say, "Look, let me turn this inside out, let me churn it up, let me take it and live my life alongside it, you know. Let this Bhagavad Gita be part of my everyday life and my everyday guidance, you know." And then from that point of view, we'll have our Krishna consciousness movement continue stronger and stronger, with so many wonderful souls out there who can actually preach and imbibe this philosophy. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.